Chapter 1: The Accountant Who Looked Too Hard. Elena Vale had always believed numbers told the truth. People lied. Governments lied. CEOs lied while smiling through magazine interviews and charity galas. But numbers? Numbers exposed everything eventually, which was exactly why she found herself alone in her office at 2 in the morning staring at a spreadsheet that could probably get her killed. Rain battered the windows of the finance firm while fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. Half-eaten noodles sat beside her keyboard and 3 empty coffee cups surrounded her laptop like war casualties. "I hate rich people," she muttered while scrolling through another set of transaction reports. The company she was auditing supposedly specialized in international humanitarian relief funding. On paper, they looked clean. Too clean. Elena narrowed her eyes at the screen. $7 million had vanished from a medical supply fund in Belgium before reappearing inside a shell corporation in Zurich less than a minute later. Another transfer disappeared through Cyprus. Another through Luxembourg. The timing was impossible for legal transactions. Someone had built a laundering machine so sophisticated it bordered on artistic. Most accountants would have missed it. Elena didn't. She leaned closer, heart slowly beginning to pound. "Oh, no," she whispered. Another name surfaced repeatedly across the hidden accounts. Blackthorn Holdings. Elena searched it. Nothing public appeared except dead-end corporate registrations and fake directors. Which meant it was important. She dug deeper. 3 hours later she wished she hadn't. Every trail led back to one man. Aurelio Volkov. The fixer. Billionaire. Political manipulator. Rumored arms broker. Ghost. No verified photographs existed online because somehow every image of him disappeared within hours. People whispered about him on encrypted forums like he was a myth criminals used to scare each other. And Elena had just uncovered enough evidence to connect him to billions in illegal transactions. She stared at the screen in horror. "I'm going to die because of Excel." Sensible people would have stopped there. Elena copied the files onto an encrypted flash drive instead. Something felt wrong inside her own firm. Too many locked files. Too many erased audits. She trusted her instincts more than she trusted corporate lawyers. By sunrise she was exhausted, paranoid, and absolutely certain someone dangerous now knew her name. At exactly 8:14 a.m., chaos erupted outside her office. Men shouted. Someone screamed. Heavy footsteps thundered down the hallway. Elena froze. Then her office door burst open. 2 men in dark suits stormed inside, scanning the room. "Where is she?" one barked. Elena didn't wait to hear the rest. She grabbed her bag and bolted for the emergency stairwell. Her pulse roared in her ears as she sprinted downward, heels clattering against concrete. 20 floors. 19. 18. Footsteps echoed above her. "Stop," someone shouted. "Absolutely not," she yelled back breathlessly. By the time she reached the underground parking garage her lungs burned violently. Snow blew through the open exit ramps outside and freezing air hit her face. Freedom sat 30 feet away. Then a hand clamped over her mouth from behind. Elena thrashed instantly, elbowing hard into someone's ribs. A deep male grunt sounded near her ear. "Violent," a calm voice observed. Another arm locked around her waist like steel. Elena bit the hand covering her mouth hard enough to taste blood. "Jesus Christ," the man muttered. "She bites." A needle pierced her neck. Panic exploded through her system. The world tilted sideways. Her knees buckled. Darkness swallowed everything. Chapter 2: The Fixer. Warmth woke her first. Soft blankets. Crackling fire. The faint scent of cedar and expensive cologne. Elena groaned and forced her eyes open slowly. A massive bedroom surrounded her. Dark wood walls. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking endless snow-covered mountains. A fireplace large enough to roast a small village. None of it mattered because a man sat watching her from an armchair across the room. Elena's breath caught instantly. Beautiful wasn't a strong enough word. He looked carved from shadows and expensive sin. Dark hair fell loosely over his forehead. Sharp cheekbones cut through the firelight. His black dress shirt stretched over broad shoulders with the sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms. Calm gray eyes studied her with terrifying patience. "Elena Vale," he said smoothly. "You're awake." Her stomach dropped. "Oh no." The man's mouth twitched faintly. That is usually the reaction. She pushed herself upright immediately. "You kidnapped me." "Correct." "You drugged me." "Also correct." "You're Aurelio Volkov." "Unfortunately." Elena stared at him for a long moment before grabbing the nearest object, a decorative pillow, and launching it directly at his face. Volkov caught it effortlessly without blinking. Silence filled the room. "You assaulted me with embroidery," he noted. "I'll escalate if necessary." To her horror, amusement flickered across his face. "Interesting. You're a psychopath." "Frequently." Elena swung her legs off the bed carefully. "Where am I?" "Safe." "That is not an answer." "Remote estate in northern Finland." Her eyes widened. "Finland? You were unconscious for most of the flight. You flew me across continents?" "You uncovered my financial network," he said calmly. "You were not staying in London." Elena glared at him furiously. "I have rights." "Not currently." "I'm going to escape." "Probably," he admitted. "You seem stubborn." "You can't keep me here forever." Volkov stood slowly. The movement alone radiated dangerous control. "No," he said quietly. "But until I determine whether you're a threat, you remain my guest." "Guest?" Elena laughed incredulously. "Do your guests normally arrive unconscious?" "Only accountants." She hated how funny that almost was. Volkov crossed the room toward her with measured steps. Elena's body immediately tensed. He noticed. Of course he noticed. "Relax," he murmured. "If I intended to hurt you, we would not be discussing it." "That is not comforting." He stopped close enough for her to see faint scars near his throat. "You found things no one else has ever uncovered," he said quietly. "Do you understand how dangerous that makes you?" Elena lifted her chin despite the fear clawing through her stomach. "Do you understand kidnapping is illegal?" For the first time, a genuine smile appeared. It transformed his entire face into something devastating. "You're not frightened enough," he murmured. "I'm terrified," she snapped. "I'm just also angry." His gaze darkened slightly. "That," he said softly, "is significantly more interesting." Later that evening Elena discovered 3 important things. 1. The estate was heavily guarded. 2. Every exit was locked. 3. Aurelio Volkov apparently owned silk pajama sets for kidnapped women. She stared at the folded clothing left on the bed in disbelief. This is how serial killers start documentaries. A knock sounded at the door. "Come in so I can insult you properly," she called. Volkov entered carrying a tray of food. Elena blinked. "Did you just personally bring me dinner?" "The chef feared poisoning you accidentally." "That's ridiculous." "I threatened him." Elena stared at him. "You threatened your chef over soup?" "I dislike uncertainty." He set the tray down calmly. "Steak. Potatoes. Warm bread." It smelled incredible. "You cannot emotionally manipulate me with carbohydrates," Elena informed him. "That remains to be seen." She hated herself for eating everything. Chapter 3, Snowbound. Escape attempt 1 happened the next morning. Elena waited until sunrise, stole a butter knife from breakfast, and attempted to pry open a service door leading outside. The knife snapped almost immediately. "I had higher expectations for you," Volkov said from behind her. Elena whipped around. Do you teleport? You're loud. You're impossible. He glanced at the broken knife. That was silverware. I noticed. The door is reinforced steel. I noticed that too. Volkov studied her for a moment before removing his gloves slowly. Come. Absolutely not. You're freezing. Only then did Elena realize her fingers had gone numb from standing near the exterior corridor. Volkov sighed quietly like she personally exhausted him. Then he stepped forward, grabbed her wrist gently, and pulled her toward the main hall. Elena should have fought him harder. Instead she became distracted by how warm his hands were. Which felt deeply unacceptable. The estate itself looked less like a house and more like an isolated fortress designed by emotionally unavailable royalty. Massive stone walls. Endless corridors. Dark wood libraries. Security cameras hidden everywhere. Outside, snow stretched endlessly across the mountains like a frozen prison. Elena spent the next few days testing boundaries constantly. She questioned guards. Picked locks. Tried hacking security systems. Volkov stopped every attempt with infuriating calm. You changed the passwords, she demanded after failing to access the surveillance network. You guessed them too quickly. Your password was literally Cerberus. He was misunderstood. He was a demon dog. Exactly. Elena discovered Volkov rarely slept. Most nights she found lights glowing beneath his office door long after midnight. One evening curiosity finally overpowered common sense. She pushed the office door open cautiously. Volkov sat behind a massive desk surrounded by screens displaying financial reports, security feeds, and encrypted communications. He looked up immediately. You should knock. You kidnapped me. Boundaries feel flexible. His lips twitched faintly. Elena crossed her arms. Do you ever sleep? Sometimes. That's unhealthy. So is investigating organized crime alone at 3 a.m. Touché. Volkov leaned back in his chair studying her quietly. You continue behaving as though I'm not dangerous. You are dangerous. Yet you insult me constantly. Elena shrugged. Coping mechanism. Silence settled between them briefly. Snow drifted outside the office windows in thick white sheets. Then Volkov spoke again, quieter this time. Most people fear me immediately. Should I? His expression became unreadable. Yes. Elena expected intimidation. Threats maybe. Instead Volkov looked almost tired. Like being feared had become exhausting years ago. It unsettled her more than cruelty would have. You're staring, he observed. I'm profiling you. And? She hesitated. I think you're lonely. Volkov went completely still. Wrong answer. Extremely wrong answer. Elena braced for anger. Instead he laughed softly under his breath like she'd genuinely surprised him. Careful, Elena, he murmured. You're starting to notice things. Later that night Elena stood near her bedroom window watching snowstorm winds whip across the mountains. The isolation finally hit her fully. No escape routes. No communication. No one knew where she was. Fear tightened painfully in her chest. A knock sounded behind her. Volkov entered carrying another mug of hot chocolate. You look unhappy, he said. I'm kidnapped in Finland. Fair point. He handed her the mug. Their fingers brushed briefly. Heat flashed through her instantly and judging by the look in Volkov's eyes, he noticed too. Which was a problem. A very large problem. Because dangerous men were not supposed to look at women like that. Like hunger mixed with fascination. Like he was already becoming addicted to her. Chapter 4, Obsession is an Ugly Color. By the second week Elena had developed 3 deeply concerning habits. First, she argued with Aurelio Volkov recreationally. Second, she had memorized the sound of his footsteps. Third, she was beginning to enjoy provoking him. The last one was probably the most dangerous. "You're staring again," Volkov said one morning without looking up from his newspaper. Elena sat across from him at the absurdly long dining table wearing one of his oversized sweaters because apparently Stockholm Syndrome came with comfortable knitwear. "I'm trying to determine whether your cheekbones are natural or evidence of dark magic." "They're natural." "Suspicious." Volkov folded the paper calmly. "You flirt strangely." Elena nearly choked on her coffee. "I am not flirting with you. You stole my sweater. It was cold. You're sitting in my chair." Elena glanced down. She was, in fact, sitting in the chair at the head of the table while Volkov sat beside her instead. "This is unrelated." Of course. The infuriating thing was that he never sounded smug. Just quietly amused, which somehow made it worse. Elena had expected cruelty from him. Manipulation. Violence. Instead she got midnight conversations in the library and a terrifyingly attentive billionaire who noticed when she skipped meals. He also hovered constantly. If she wandered outside, guards followed. If she disappeared for more than 10 minutes, Volkov magically appeared nearby pretending it was coincidence. It was not coincidence. "You're monitoring my location through the security system, aren't you?" she asked one evening. Volkov looked offended she'd figured it out. "Obviously. That's insane. You attempted to escape using a laundry cart yesterday." "I almost succeeded." "You rolled into a fountain." "The wheel locked unexpectedly." Volkov rubbed a hand over his mouth, clearly hiding amusement. Elena narrowed her eyes. "You're enjoying this." "Immensely. You are genuinely evil. And yet you continue talking to me voluntarily." That shut her up faster than expected. Because he was right. She did seek him out. Every evening somehow ended with them in the same room. Sometimes they argued over books. Sometimes they played chess. Sometimes they simply sat in silence while snowstorms raged outside the estate windows. Elena should have hated how comfortable it felt. One night she wandered into the kitchen around midnight searching for snacks. Instead she found Volkov standing at the counter in black sweatpants and nothing else. Elena stopped so abruptly she almost slipped. Oh. Oh, that was unfair. Tattoos curled across his ribs and shoulder in dark intricate patterns. Scars crossed his chest in pale lines that looked old and vicious. His hair was damp like he'd just showered. Volkov glanced up slowly. Then froze. Silence filled the kitchen. Elena's brain stopped functioning entirely. "You're staring," he said quietly. "I support women's rights," she blurted. "But more importantly women's wrongs." Volkov blinked once before laughing under his breath. Actual laughter. Deep and warm and devastating. Elena hated how attractive it sounded. "You came downstairs for food?" he asked. "I did originally, yes." Volkov opened the fridge calmly. "You panic when nervous." "I do not. You once explained tax fraud for 20 minutes after I touched your hand." Elena grabbed a bread roll and pointed at him accusingly. "You make me psychologically unstable." "Interesting," he murmured. "You assume you were stable before meeting me." She threw the bread roll directly at his face. He caught that too. Infuriating man. The next afternoon Elena made the catastrophic mistake of flirting with the estate chef. Not intentionally. Matteo was simply kind and funny and had made her tiramisu. "You're my favorite person here," Elena told him dramatically while stealing another spoonful from the mixing bowl. "Do not let Volkov hear you say that," Matteo warned immediately. "Why?" Matteo looked deeply concerned. "Because I enjoy being employed." Too late. A cold voice sounded behind her. "Am I interrupting?" Elena turned slowly. Volkov stood in the doorway wearing a black coat and an unreadable expression. Matteo visibly paled. "Sir." Volkov's eyes moved from Elena to the spoon in her hand to Mateo standing far too close beside her. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees instantly. Elena noticed it immediately. "Oh my God," she said slowly. "Are you jealous?" "No, that was too fast." Mateo silently escaped the kitchen like a man fleeing a natural disaster. "Coward." Elena crossed her arms smugly. "You're jealous." Volkov stared at her for a long moment. Then he stepped closer. "You touched his arm." Elena blinked. "That's your evidence?" "You laughed at his jokes." "They were funny." "I disliked it." Elena tried not to smile. "Failed horribly." "You're possessive." "Yes." The honesty startled her. Volkov moved even closer until she could smell cedar and whiskey on his skin. "Do not encourage other men around me, Elena." Her pulse jumped painfully. "Why?" His gaze darkened. "Because I have very limited patience where you are concerned." The air between them became dangerously heavy. Elena's breath caught slightly. Volkov noticed that too because of course he did. He noticed everything about her. Then suddenly he stepped back like he physically forced himself to. "Enjoy your dessert," he said calmly before leaving the kitchen. Elena stared after him in stunned silence. Her heart wouldn't stop racing for the next hour. Chapter 5: The Storm. The storm arrived overnight. By morning snow buried half the estate and brutal winds rattled every window violently. Elena stood near the glass watching white chaos consume the mountains. "We are absolutely dying here," she announced dramatically. Volkov sat nearby reading through encrypted reports. The estate was designed for storms. That sounds like something rich villains say before freezing to death. "You think I'm a villain?" "You kidnapped me." "Minor detail." Elena wandered restlessly through the library afterward because apparently being trapped indoors with a dangerously attractive criminal was turning her into a dramatic Victorian woman. By afternoon she was bored enough to start annoying Volkov intentionally. "Your decorating style resembles a depressed vampire." Volkov looked up from his laptop. "You live here too." "Against my will." "And yet you continue stealing my sweaters." "They're soft." "You're avoiding the conversation." Elena sprawled across the couch dramatically. "You own 70 Shades of Black. Even your mugs look emotionally unavailable." "I enjoy consistency." "You enjoy trauma." Volkov closed the laptop slowly. "Careful." "Or what?" "I'll discuss interior design in detail." Elena gasped. "You wouldn't." "Italian marble flooring," he said coldly. "Imported from Florence." "Monster." He almost smiled again. God, she was starting to crave that expression. Evening fell early beneath the storm clouds. Power flickered once. Twice. Then the entire estate plunged into darkness. Elena froze instantly. Thunder cracked somewhere beyond the mountains. Her stomach tightened hard. Another flash of lightning illuminated the room briefly before darkness swallowed everything again. She hated the dark. Always had. Childhood memories surfaced unwanted and sharp. Locked closets. Power outages. Being alone too long. Elena forced herself to breathe steadily. "Elena?" Volkov's voice cut through the darkness nearby. "I'm fine." "You're not." Another thunderclap sounded. Elena flinched involuntarily. Silence followed. Then footsteps approached slowly. "Come here," Volkov said quietly. "I said I'm fine." "You're shaking." She hated that he noticed. Hated that he always noticed. But when another blast of thunder rattled the windows, Elena finally moved toward him reluctantly. Warm hands settled on her shoulders immediately. Volkov pulled his coat around her without hesitation. "There," he murmured. The darkness suddenly felt less suffocating. Elena realized she was standing directly against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat. Strong. Steady. Safe. Which was an insane thought considering the man literally kidnapped her. This is weird, she muttered weakly. Extremely. But neither of them moved away. Lightning flashed again, illuminating Volkov's face inches from hers. His eyes tracked slowly over her features like he was trying to memorize every detail. Elena's breath caught. The tension between them became unbearable. You should stop looking at me like that, she whispered. I can't. The honesty in his voice shattered something inside her. Then he kissed her. Slow at first. Careful. Like he was waiting for permission to continue. Elena should have pushed him away immediately. Instead her fingers gripped the front of his shirt automatically. Volkov made a low sound against her mouth that nearly destroyed her remaining common sense. The kiss deepened instantly. Possessive. Hungry. Months of tension exploded all at once. His hand slid into her hair while the other tightened around her waist like he physically couldn't pull her close enough. Elena kissed him back just as fiercely. Which felt like an enormous mistake. A wonderful mistake. When they finally separated, both of them breathed hard in the darkness. Volkov rested his forehead lightly against hers. You are ruining my self-control, he murmured roughly. Elena swallowed hard. You kidnapped me. I'm aware. This is deeply unhealthy. Also aware. She should have stepped away then. Instead she kissed him first this time. Chapter 6, Enemies with Benefits. Everything became significantly worse after the kiss. By worse, Elena unfortunately meant hotter. Tension followed them everywhere now. Breakfast conversations felt loaded. Casual touches lasted too long. Every argument somehow transformed into foreplay against their will. Elena blamed Volkov entirely. Stop looking at me like that, she snapped one morning. Volkov glanced up from his espresso. Like what? Like you're mentally undressing me. I'm not doing it mentally anymore. Elena nearly inhaled her coffee. You cannot say things like that casually. I seemed calm. You are evil. Repeatedly established. The truly horrifying part was how attentive he became afterward. One touch from him could completely derail her thoughts. A hand at her lower back while walking through corridors. Fingers brushing her wrist during dinner. His voice dropping lower whenever he leaned close. Elena was losing the psychological war badly. One evening she found herself sitting on the couch beside him while reviewing financial reports he'd reluctantly allowed her to see. This laundering structure is insane, she muttered while scanning numbers. You buried assets beneath fake pharmaceutical acquisitions? It worked. You're financially psychotic. And yet you sound impressed. I am impressed, she admitted. Concernedly impressed. Volkov leaned closer to look over her shoulder. Too close. Heat radiated from his body instantly. Elena's thoughts scattered violently. You're distracted, he murmured near her ear. Your breathing changed. Respectfully, she said weakly, shut up. His hand slid onto the couch behind her. Trapping her without actually touching her. Elena's pulse went feral. You know, Volkov said softly, most people are afraid of me. I am afraid of you. Not physically. He was right. That was the dangerous part. Elena trusted him with her safety now. Completely. Emotionally though? That was another issue entirely. Because Aurelio Volkov looked at her like obsession had become a religion. And she was starting to like it far too much. Chapter 7, The Monster Under the Ice. Elena woke up alone for the first time in days and immediately knew something was wrong. The other side of the bed was cold. Snowlight filtered through the curtains in pale silver streaks while distant voices echoed somewhere downstairs. She sat upright slowly, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Bed. Right. Another deeply concerning development in her life. 3 weeks ago she'd been auditing financial crimes in London. Now she occasionally fell asleep wrapped around a criminal billionaire who kissed like he wanted to consume souls. Her therapist would have a stroke. Elena pulled on one of Volkov's shirts and wandered into the hallway. Guards moved through the estate with unusual urgency. Tension hung heavily in the air. Mateo spotted her first in the kitchen and looked relieved. You should not be walking around right now. Good morning to you too. Volkov is in a mood. Elena blinked. That sounds terrifying. One man accidentally spilled coffee on his desk earlier. And? Mateo lowered his voice dramatically. We haven't seen him since. Elena stared. You people act like he feeds employees into wood chippers. We genuinely don't know that he doesn't. Before Elena could respond, a loud crash echoed from somewhere deeper in the estate. Silence followed immediately afterward. Mateo crossed himself. See? Elena found Volkov in his office standing beside a shattered whiskey decanter. Two men in dark suits stood rigidly near the door looking moments away from cardiac arrest. Volkov himself looked lethal. Not angry. Worse. Calm in the terrifying way avalanches probably felt calm before destroying villages. His shirt sleeves were rolled to his elbows and blood streaked across one knuckle where glass had cut his skin. Leave, he told the two men quietly. They vanished instantly. Elena leaned against the doorway carefully. You know normal billionaires buy yachts during midlife crises. Volkov glanced up sharply. Some of the tension eased from his expression the moment he saw her. Which did weird things to her stomach. You should be asleep. You shattered glass dramatically before breakfast. It felt attention-seeking. His mouth twitched faintly. Come here. Elena approached cautiously. Volkov grabbed her wrist gently and inspected the sleeves of his shirt hanging off her body. Something dark flickered in his eyes. Possessiveness again. You wear my clothes constantly now, he murmured. Your sweaters are emotionally manipulative. Interesting excuse. Elena noticed the blood on his hand again. You're hurt. It's nothing. You literally bleed like a dramatic Gothic novel. She grabbed his wrist before he could object and pulled him toward the couch. Volkov allowed it with suspicious ease. Elena cleaned the cut carefully while he watched her in silence. Who upset you? She asked eventually. A business issue. That means murder, doesn't it? Potentially. You say that too casually. Volkov's gaze moved slowly across her face. Most things feel less severe when you're nearby. Elena's hands paused briefly. There it was again. Those terrifyingly honest statements he dropped without warning. You can't keep saying things like that, she muttered. Why? Because I start forgetting you're dangerous. Volkov leaned closer slowly. Elena. His voice dropped lower. I am most dangerous when it comes to you. Her pulse skipped painfully. That is not reassuring. It wasn't intended to be. Silence stretched between them, thick and electric. Then Elena noticed documents spread across his desk. Financial records. Offshore transfers. Names she recognized from the files she originally uncovered. You're still moving money through the syndicate. Yes. Why? Volkov looked away briefly before answering. Because governments are inefficient. That sounds like something every supervillain says before starting world domination. I dislike world domination. Too much paperwork. Elena snorted despite herself. Then she noticed something else buried inside the files. Missing persons reports. Human trafficking investigations. Payments linked to private security operations. Her amusement faded instantly. Wait. She looked closer. These transfers, Volkov went still. Elena slowly lifted her eyes toward him. You're using the laundering network to fund covert operations. Silence. Then Volkov exhaled softly. I told you not to keep digging. You're dismantling trafficking rings. Partially. Partially? Arms dealing. Political corruption. Organized crime. Elena stared at him in disbelief. You're basically running illegal vigilante warfare. That is an aggressively dramatic description. You have mercenaries. Fair point. Her mind reeled trying to process everything. So the money funds operations governments refuse to touch publicly. You still commit crimes. Constantly. Elena paced away from him, overwhelmed. You kidnapped me because I discovered this? At first. She turned sharply. At first? Volkov's expression shifted slightly. Vulnerability. Rare and dangerous. Then I kept you because I couldn't let you leave. The honesty hit harder than she expected. That's not romantic, she whispered. I know. But the way he looked at her made her chest ache anyway. Chapter 8, The Man Who Watched Her Sleep. After discovering the truth about Volkov's operations, Elena couldn't stop watching him differently. Before, he'd been dangerous in a cold abstract way. Now she understood the weight he carried beneath the expensive suits and terrifying composure. He wasn't trying to build an empire. He was fighting one. Illegally. Violently. Obsessively. Which somehow made him even more dangerous. Elena found him later that night standing alone on the balcony outside his office while snow fell around him silently. He wore only a black sweater despite the freezing temperature. Idiot. She stepped outside reluctantly. You're going to get hypothermia trying to look mysterious. Volkov glanced over his shoulder. I was thinking. That's usually when the scary stuff happens. Snowflakes landed in his dark hair. Elena hated how cinematic he looked. It felt unfair to humanity. You're avoiding me, she said quietly. No, you've barely spoken for hours. Volkov rested his hands against the balcony railing. You finally understand what I am. A control freak with insomnia? A violent man. Elena stepped closer slowly. You kidnapped me. Threatened people. Monitor my heartbeat through security systems. That sounds worse when listed together. My point is I already knew you were insane. A faint laugh escaped him unexpectedly. Elena moved beside him at the railing. Cold wind whipped around them. You save people, she said eventually. Sometimes. You kill people too. Yes. The honesty remained startling every single time. Does it bother you? She asked softly. Volkov was quiet for a long moment. It used to. Something about that answer hurt her chest unexpectedly. Elena studied his profile carefully beneath the snowfall. You think you're a monster. I know I am. No, she said quietly. I think you're a man who convinced himself he deserves to be one. Volkov finally looked at her fully then. The expression in his eyes nearly stole her breath. Intense. Raw. Like she'd reached inside him somewhere no one else ever had. You should stop doing that, he murmured. Doing what? Seeing parts of me I prefer hidden. Elena's pulse quickened slightly. Too bad. Volkov stepped closer. You continue behaving recklessly around me. You've never hurt me. That is precisely the problem. Snow fell heavily around them while tension thickened in the freezing air. Elena's gaze dropped briefly to his mouth. Mistake. Huge mistake. Because Volkov noticed instantly. His hand rose slowly to her throat, fingers resting lightly beneath her jaw. Tell me to stop, he said softly. Elena couldn't breathe correctly. I don't want you to. Something dark and possessive flashed across his face before he kissed her hard enough to send her stumbling backward against the balcony railing. Heat exploded through her body instantly. Volkov kissed like a man starved. One hand tangled into her hair while the other gripped her waist tightly enough to leave bruises later. Elena kissed him back just as desperately. The cold air vanished completely beneath the fire between them. Volkov made a rough sound against her mouth when she pulled him closer by his sweater. You are catastrophically bad for my self-control, he muttered between kisses. Elena's head tipped back when his mouth moved along her throat. You say that like you have any self-control left. Not around you. God. That voice alone should have been illegal. They stumbled back inside somehow without separating properly. Elena barely processed the hallway before Volkov pinned her gently against the wall and kissed her again. Hungry. Possessive. Obsessive. Like he'd spent weeks restraining himself and finally snapped. Elena's fingers slid into his hair. Aurelio, she whispered breathlessly. The effect was immediate. Volkov froze for half a second, like hearing his first name from her physically affected him. Then his forehead dropped against hers roughly. Say it again. You're ridiculous. Elena. Warning. Her pulse jumped. She smirked slightly. Aurelio. He kissed her again like punishment. Chapter 9, Blood in the Snow. Elena woke sometime after midnight to alarms screaming through the estate. She sat upright instantly, disoriented. Red emergency lights flashed across the bedroom walls. Outside the door, rapid footsteps thundered through the hallways. Gunshots cracked somewhere downstairs. Her stomach dropped violently. What the hell? The bedroom door burst open. Volkov entered already armed, wearing black tactical gear with blood splattered across one sleeve. Elena's heart stopped. Are you hurt? She demanded immediately. His eyes locked onto her. Relief flashed across his face so quickly she almost missed it. Get dressed. Aurelio, now. His voice cut sharply enough to silence her instantly. Elena scrambled from bed while more gunfire echoed through the estate. Volkov moved toward the windows, checking outside with deadly focus. She'd never seen him like this before. Cold. Precise. Terrifyingly calm. The softness he showed only her had vanished completely. Who's attacking us? She asked while pulling on clothes frantically. Russian syndicate. That doesn't answer anything. They found the estate. He handed her a small handgun. Elena stared at it in horror. No, you know how to shoot? Technically. Good enough. Another explosion shook the building violently. Elena nearly fell sideways. Volkov grabbed her instantly, steadying her against his chest. Stay behind me at all times, he ordered quietly. Fear finally crashed fully into her system then. Real fear. Because Volkov looked worried. And men like Aurelio Volkov probably didn't worry unless situations became catastrophic. The hallway outside was chaos. Armed guards rushed through corridors while distant shouting echoed across the estate. Smoke drifted faintly through the air. Volkov kept one arm firmly around Elena while guiding her downstairs. Gunfire erupted nearby suddenly. Elena flinched hard. Volkov reacted instantly, shoving her behind him while firing twice down the corridor with terrifying accuracy. Two bodies collapsed. Elena froze completely. Volkov grabbed her face abruptly. Look at me. She forced herself to focus on him instead of the blood spreading across the floor. Breathe. His hand shook slightly against her cheeks. Not from fear for himself. Fear for her. That realization hit harder than the violence around them. I'm okay, she whispered quickly. Volkov searched her face like he needed visual confirmation before pulling her against him tightly for one brief second. Then he released her and kept moving. Outside, snowstorms raged violently beneath the night sky while armed men flooded the estate grounds below. The entire mountain looked like a war zone. Elena's pulse roared painfully in her ears. One attacker suddenly appeared at the far end of the corridor, aiming directly toward them. Everything happened too fast. Volkov fired first. The man dropped instantly. Silence followed. Elena stared at the body in shock. Then Volkov turned toward her immediately. Are you hurt? His voice sounded rougher now. Urgent. Elena shook her head numbly. Blood stained his collar. You're bleeding. Not important. Aurelio, I asked about you. His expression cracked slightly then. Fear. Genuine fear. Not for himself. For her. Something inside Elena shattered completely in that moment. Because nobody had ever looked at her like she mattered more than survival itself. The Devil's Ledger. Chapter 10, If you leave, I'll still find you. The attack lasted until dawn. By sunrise the estate looked like something dragged out of a war documentary. Smoke curled into the gray morning sky while armed guards moved across the snow-covered grounds collecting weapons and bodies. Elena stood near the shattered library windows wrapped in one of Volkov's coats watching medics rush through the courtyard below. Her hand still shook faintly. She couldn't stop replaying the sound of gunfire in her head. Or the look on Aurelio's face every time he checked whether she was alive. The bedroom door opened quietly behind her. Elena turned instantly. Volkov stepped inside looking exhausted for the first time since she'd met him. Blood stained the collar of his black shirt and a fresh cut sliced across his eyebrow. His gaze found her immediately. Relief softened his entire expression. You should be resting, he said quietly. Elena crossed the room before he could react and grabbed his face carefully. You're injured. Minor. Your definition of minor is psychologically alarming. Volkov's hand settled automatically on her waist. Even now. Even covered in blood after surviving an attack, his first instinct was touching her. Keeping her close. Elena swallowed hard. Sit down. Elena, I'm serious. Something in her voice made him obey without argument. Which honestly felt more alarming than the gunfight. Elena cleaned the cut above his eyebrow carefully while Aurelio sat silently watching her. The room felt strangely intimate despite the chaos outside. You terrified me, she admitted softly. Volkov's jaw tightened immediately. I failed to secure the estate properly. That is not what I meant. Elena set the cloth aside. When I saw blood on you, she stopped speaking because emotion clogged her throat unexpectedly. Aurelio's expression shifted. Softer now. More dangerous somehow because it exposed too much. Come here, he murmured. Elena moved instantly into his lap without even thinking about it. Aurelio wrapped both arms around her tightly and buried his face against her neck for one long silent moment. I nearly killed 6 men for looking at you incorrectly tonight, he muttered against her skin. Elena blinked. That's somehow the least surprising thing you've ever said. A quiet laugh escaped him. Then his arms tightened further around her waist. When they breached the east wing, he said quietly, I thought they reached your room first. Elena pulled back enough to see his face properly. Fear still lingered there beneath the composure. Real fear. Aurelio, I have spent years surviving people far more dangerous than me, he continued softly. Nothing has ever frightened me the way the thought of losing you does. Her chest physically ached hearing that. God. This man loved like a disaster. Violently. Completely. Elena touched the cut near his eyebrow gently. You're obsessed with me. Pathologically. That should concern me more. Probably. She laughed weakly. Then Aurelio kissed her before she could speak again. Slow this time. Not desperate like the night before. Just devastatingly tender. Which somehow affected her even more. Elena melted into him immediately. His hand slid into her hair while his mouth moved against hers with dangerous patience. You know what the worst part is? She whispered breathlessly when they separated. What? I think I'd miss you if I escaped. Aurelio went completely still beneath her. Elena immediately realized how honest that sounded. Too honest. His gaze darkened intensely. Do not say things like that casually. Why? Because my self-control is hanging by a thread already. Elena smiled slightly. You keep mentioning self-control for a man currently holding me hostage in his lap. Fair criticism. He kissed her again anyway. The following days became strangely domestic considering they technically lived inside a heavily guarded criminal fortress. Elena worked beside Aurelio in his office reviewing financial reports while he handled operations. Matteo cooked aggressively romantic meals whenever tension between them became unbearable. The guards stopped pretending they weren't together after Elena accidentally walked into breakfast wearing one of Aurelio's dress shirts and bite marks on her throat. Morning, Matteo greeted carefully while avoiding eye contact. Elena grabbed coffee immediately. Don't start. I said nothing. Your face said enough. Across the kitchen, one guard silently handed another 50 euros. Elena narrowed her eyes suspiciously. Why are people exchanging money? Nobody answered. Aurelio entered moments later adjusting his watch. The entire kitchen instantly straightened like military recruits sensing danger. Elena stared at them. They're scared of you. Healthy instinct. Aurelio pressed a kiss briefly against her temple while walking past. Every single guard froze in visible shock. Elena blinked. Did you just publicly display affection? Aurelio poured coffee calmly. Yes. Your employees look traumatized. One of the guards actually looked emotional. Matteo crossed himself again. The apocalypse approaches. Aurelio ignored them completely and slid a plate of food toward Elena. Eat. You sound like an aggressive grandmother. You forgot lunch yesterday. Elena pointed accusingly. See? Obsessive. Correct. Honestly, at this point he wasn't even denying it anymore. That afternoon Elena discovered the true extent of Aurelio's insanity accidentally. She wandered into the security room searching for him and froze immediately at the wall of surveillance screens. Every hallway. Every room entrance. Every exterior camera. One particular monitor displayed her bedroom. Another displayed the library where she usually read. Another showed the kitchen. Elena stared slowly. Aurelio. He looked up from a conversation with one of his security men. Yes? Why are there 12 separate camera angles following me? Silence. The security guard quietly left the room without permission. Coward. Elena turned toward Aurelio in disbelief. Are you tracking me through the entire estate? For safety purposes. This is serial killer behavior. You were attacked 3 days ago. You have labeled folders. Aurelio glanced briefly toward the monitors. The kitchen camera is my favorite. Elena stared at him. You need therapy. I have you. That is not the same thing. He looked genuinely unconvinced. Later that evening Elena sat across from him in the library trying unsuccessfully to stay angry. Aurelio lounged on the couch looking unfairly attractive while reading reports on his tablet. You realize normal couples don't monitor each other through security systems. We're not normal. That's not an excuse. It's an explanation. Elena sighed dramatically. I can't believe I'm dating a supervillain. Aurelio looked up slowly. Dating? Oh no. Elena felt heat rush into her face instantly. I misspoke. No, he said quietly, eyes locked onto hers now. I don't think you did. The tension in the room shifted immediately. Elena swallowed hard. Aurelio, say it again. His voice dropped lower. Dangerous. She should have deflected. Mocked him. Done literally anything intelligent. Instead Elena whispered, we're dating. Aurelio stared at her for one long devastating second before standing abruptly. Then he crossed the room, grabbed her face, and kissed her hard enough to leave her dizzy. Elena laughed breathlessly against his mouth. You're insane. About you? Completely. God help her, she loved hearing that. 3 weeks later, Elena finally escaped. Technically. It started because Matteo smuggled wine into movie night and everyone became slightly emotional after the second bottle. Aurelio sat beside Elena on the massive couch while the guards watched an action movie with increasingly terrible acting. Halfway through the film, Elena whispered, "I could definitely escape this estate if I wanted." Aurelio didn't even look away from the screen. "No, your confidence insults me. You once got trapped inside the wine cellar for 2 hours. The lock malfunctioned." Aurelio finally glanced toward her lazily. "Try." Elena narrowed her eyes immediately. "Fine." She waited exactly 20 minutes before sneaking out during a loud explosion scene in the movie. Easy. Embarrassingly easy. No guards stopped her. No alarms sounded. Suspicious. Elena made it all the way to the garage before realization hit. Every car key was already sitting neatly on the driver's seat of a black SUV. A note rested beside them. "You forgot your gloves. It's cold outside." Elena stared upward at the security camera in betrayal. "I hate you." Aurelio's voice crackled through nearby speakers instantly. "No, you don't." Elena wanted to stay furious. "Really?" But then she noticed a second note beneath the first one. In Aurelio's handwriting. "If you leave, I'll still find you. Not because I want to control you. Because this stopped feeling like survival the moment I met you." Elena's chest tightened painfully. Damn him. Absolutely damn him. She grabbed the notes and marched back upstairs, dramatically prepared to yell at him. Instead, she found Aurelio waiting outside the theater room wearing that infuriatingly calm expression. "Done escaping?" he asked. Elena shoved the notes against his chest. "You are the most emotionally manipulative man alive. And yet you came back." Silence stretched between them softly. Then Elena stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his neck. Aurelio immediately pulled her close like he'd been waiting to breathe again. "You know this relationship is insane, right?" she murmured against his chest. "Profoundly." "You kidnapped me." "Yes." "You threatened a man for making me tiramisu." He flirted. Elena laughed helplessly. Then she looked up at him properly. At the terrifyingly dangerous man who watched her like she'd become the center of his universe. "I love you," she admitted quietly. Aurelio froze completely. Elena actually felt his heartbeat stumble beneath her hands. "You shouldn't look so shocked," she muttered. "You literally committed international crimes for me." His hands tightened around her waist almost painfully. Elena. Her name sounded wrecked coming from him. She smiled slightly. "See? Obsessed." Aurelio kissed her slowly then. Reverently. Like he still couldn't believe someone like her existed. Outside, snow fell softly across the mountains while the estate glowed warm against the endless winter night. And somewhere between kidnapping, gunfights, obsessive love, and catastrophic decisions, Elena realized she'd stopped wanting to escape a long time ago.